Thank you, Chuck, very much. Chris Wilson from the Greater St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau. And Chuck, I would like to thank you and the Missouri Travel Alliance Board for this opportunity to speak to the group today about sports and sports travel. These Missouri Travel Alliance hangouts have been great. They've been informational. They've been in some ways therapeutic. In some ways, they've kind of reaffirmed best practices that DMOs are putting into play. So again, appreciative of the opportunity. We are going to talk about sports and sports travel from several different perspectives. And just a quick housekeeping note, if you have any questions, any comments, please feel free to put those in the chat box, and we will make sure to address those either during the presentation or towards the end. So we look forward to hearing your feedback as well. With that said, sports are happening right now, so I want to kind of introduce our panelists who again could provide unique perspective and multiple perspective on what's going on right now with sports. First person I would like to introduce is Zach Franklin. Zach Franklin is with the Columbia Sports Commission, the Columbia Convention and Visitors Bureau, and is a member of Show Me Missouri Sports. Just for a little context, Show Me Missouri Sports is a statewide coalition that works to bring sports tourism events back to the state of Missouri. Zach, welcome. Thank you for joining us. Next, I would like to introduce Lance Kettering. Lance is with the Springfield Sports Commission, the Springfield Convention and Visitors Bureau, a member of Show Me Missouri Sports, and a baseball club administrator. So again, Lance will have multiple perspectives right now on sports and kind of the COVID-19 era, if you will. Lance, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
And next, I would like to introduce Mark Stratton. And Mark Stratton kind of oversees U.S. Baseball Park with the Show Me Collegiate League, former manager of the Drury University Panthers baseball team. And then I would also like to introduce Mackie Carlson, who is the Director of Operations for U.S. Baseball Park. Mark and Mackie, thanks for joining us as well.
Happy to be here.
And again, I'm Chris Wilson from the St. Charles Convention and Visitors Bureau. So we're going to jump right into some different perspectives. And again, we wanted to highlight that sports, youth sports, what have you, are happening right now. So for the first perspective that we kind of wanted to address was the perspective from the facility owner and operator. And Mark and Mackie, I'm going to kick this question to you first. Can you kind of give us maybe your feedback or perspective on what's currently going on right now at U.S. Ballpark? You know, some of the potential social distancing guidelines you have implemented. Maybe, you know, a little background on the park itself. Hosting events, what that's currently looking like in your world from a facility owner and operator.
Okay. Well, this is our 5th year of the park being in existence. The park used to be the Ozark Mountain Ducks Independent League, and the park sat dormant from about 2003 till we purchased it. The park has been fully renovated. We spent about $3.5 million on the park. It's gone to turf, magical video board, and the park just looks magnificent. What we have done when we first started, we had the Show Me Collegiate League, which is a summer developmental league. All 4 teams in the league were self-contained. We do very little, if any, travel. Starting this year, since so many other leagues have discontinued, we've grown from 4 teams to 7 teams. And to be honest, if we had room and space, we probably could have 10 teams because all the other opportunities to play around the country have shut down. So I'm going to let Mackie talk to you a little bit about how we have addressed CDC guidelines and COVID, all this. We have been playing. I got to be honest with you, a couple things I thought would happen. We have a lot of host families with our summer collegiate kids, and I thought we would lose all of those people. Been the opposite. We've kept all of those people. Number two, I thought we'd have more people canceling, not wanting to come and play after, with everything that's going on. That's been totally opposite of that. Last week, we had 22 games scheduled in our park as part of about a 40-game 14U to 18U Memorial Day bash. This coming week, we have another we will start, actually have 3 games tonight, 8 tomorrow, 8 Saturday, and 6 Sunday. We're part of an 80-team Heart of America tournament that's going to be put on. So people are just begging to get back to play and do it under certain circumstances. We're following the protocol. So Mackie will explain what we're doing. Go ahead, Mackie.
Yeah, so we have posted all of our guidelines on our website as well as at each entrance of the facility, and then we've been sending it out to everyone who participates, all the coaches and everything. We are temperature checking everyone as they come in, so if they have over 100.4 temperature, they are not allowed to come into the facility at all. We have 1 entrance, 1 exit, so they have to be temperature checked. If they leave to go to their car and they come back, they're still going to be temperature checked again. So anytime they enter the facility, their temperature is checked. We've put in sanitation stations throughout the park, so at any time, if people want to use hand sanitizer, that's easily accessible. We have taped off our seats. So since we're in Christian County, we're allowed to have 50% capacity. So for us, that's 2,500 people. So we have taped off every other row of our stadium seating, but then we have also taped seats within those rows with distancing in between the seats as well. So people can still sit with their families, but they're not crunched up together. And then we have also done the social distancing guidelines on our concrete for our concession stands. So they're 6 feet apart in line. All of our staff in the concession stand areas, they have masks on and they're washing their hands. They have timers for every 15 minutes and they go wash their hands and then they come back. So they're constantly doing that. The timer, as soon as it goes off, it's reset every single time. Our employees are always temperature checked every time they come in for a shift. All players are temperature checked. When the Show Me League players show up, they're temperature checked before they even step on the field. So if they have a temperature that's too high, we send them home and they're in their 2-week quarantine stage before they can even come back here. So we've implemented all those guidelines. We have minis, which is our T-ball and coach pitch, and that's coming up next week. And for the kids who don't supply their own equipment, we are going to sanitize them before they're passed off to the next player. So the bats, whenever the kid drops it, coach will sanitize it and hand it to the next kid. Helmets will be sanitized and then put on the next kid. We encourage everyone to bring their own equipment, but we know that that's not possible for everyone. So we're taking those precautions to make sure that kids can still play, but we're sanitizing everything. So that's taken care of. So yeah, we've got a lot of guidelines. Everything, like I said, is posted. We send it out every single week and make sure that all of the coaches and everyone know. We're not doing water jugs in the concession, or not the concession stand, in the dugouts anymore. Just that way people aren't drinking out of the same tub. Coaches are allowed to bring in 1 team cooler per team and put it in the dugout so kids can get their own water bottles or their own Gatorades and they have them in the dugouts. That way they're not worried about drinking from the same cup and they're throwing it on the ground and stuff like that. So we're keeping that clean and then checking the stands for trash and everything like that like normal, but doing it twice as much just to make sure that everything's cleaned up.
Yeah, we even have the hand sanitizers in the dugout.
Yeah.
So we've got those in. So if they feel they necessary to do that, the home plate umpire is wearing a mask under his mask. We're not doing the 10 feet behind. We're not doing that. When you come here, it does look like baseball. The base umpires do not have the mask on. Of course, they're 15, 20 feet away from players. So far, it's been very good. We've had last weekend, we had over 2,500 people through the park last weekend, had 0 problems. We were anticipating the weather is going to be magnificent finally down here. So we're anticipating we'll probably go over 3,000 through the park. I'll be disappointed if we don't maybe reach 3,500 through the park this weekend. We also have put in those same guidelines. We're playing travel teams. Everybody has gotten in so few games. We're now creating games in midweeks. They can come in, play a couple of nights, and all those same guidelines here. We've had not one parent call and complain, not one. People have been in the park, see what's going on. We've had zero problems.
Oh, that's good to hear. That's good to hear, and appreciate you talking to us about that. It sounds like you've got very detailed plans in place in accordance to align with those guidelines. Kind of had a follow-up question again from a facility perspective, and something that we've been kind of hearing about on the trail. And you mentioned your new video board. Have you all looked at opportunities to generate additional revenue aside from baseball? And I'll give you an example. The Powerplex up here in the region in St. Louis County, North County actually, has been doing some drive-in movies, some drive-in graduations,
Sure.
and bringing in their own billboard, if you will. But again, just using innovation and creativity within a facility. Is that something you guys have explored as well?
We've been doing that pre-pandemic where we rent the park out and they come out and they all sit in the outfield, kind of an angels in the outfield kind of thing, and they watch films. We were supposed to have a couple of graduations out here. I think the two high schools elected to go back to their own football fields and not use our field, although I thought we could have accommodated those for sure. Our biggest problem has been we are adjacent to Highway 65. 70,000 cars go by here every day. Obviously, that is a good thing for us. My biggest problem has been with the DOT saying that our video board is really a billboard, and they wanted to apply billboard sign rules and regulations, which I've got to be honest with you, whoever lobbied that stuff, that's only for if you've got a sign company and you've got billboards, it's pretty good. If you're just a company over here that's promoting things that are actually used in your park, that can get in a real gray area, and DOT has actually shut us down a couple of times for promoting somebody who is spending money in our park. So, that's a whole nother discussion, but we use our video board as much as part of our promotional package. We do what's called the scroll. We don't ever turn ours off. It's on 24/7, and we get companies on the scroll, and they love that. And my biggest problem has been trying to get through to with DOT that they won't shut us down.
Appreciate your feedback. Just a couple of other facility perspective observations we've been hearing, maybe to generate some further discussions or some questions later on, is seems to be some pretty good planning and guidelines in place right now for outdoor facilities. I'd be curious to hear from the group what that looks like in terms of indoor facilities. I know in our area that's something that those owners and operators are continue to work on. So we're seeing the trend of, okay, there's guidelines for outdoor facilities for baseball and fast pitch softball, what have you. But maybe a question for later on is, what are you seeing in your destination with your facility operators for indoor facilities? Because I think that's kind of the next step there. And then also we're hearing a lot that maybe local universities and high schools might be a little bit resistant at first or for a while to rent to outside groups. So I was curious if you guys were hearing that as well in your destination. And again, all part of this facility perspective module right now. We can return to that. Thank you, Mark and Mackie. Great input, great perspective. Wanted to throw it to Zach or Lance for any follow-ups on a facility perspective.
Yeah, I'm happy to chime in real quick, Chris. And sorry, I realized I was on mute when you introduced me. So thanks for the nice introduction. And thanks for letting me know, by the way.
Right. We still might be waiting.
Yeah. I think, on our side of things, we kind of defer to the facility owners and operators, as I think it's, they're kind of the decision makers and the rules and regulations of the facility. But I think with that, it's very important for us to be up to date on all the things they're implementing, as we're kind of that middleman a lot of the times between them and that planner or the rights holder. So for us to make sure we're providing them accurate information and being as transparent as possible, I think is very important at this time.
Very good. Appreciate that. Lance, anything you want to add on that?
You've got the private facility perspective at US Baseball. And I see some other people on the call that are probably running into this too, with outside events using public facilities. That's just something we're keeping an eye on. And when you're using school districts, your county or your city might open things up, but you still are working with the the school districts to make sure that, that they're going to allow use of the facilities. That's kind of where we are on a few events. We have a facility that we've used. Actually, it's closer to Branson, but in Forsyth, Missouri, they're not allowing outside use for the event we use them for, even though the areas are more opened up down there. So,
yeah, and Zach kind of touched upon this too, that in accordance with the rules and regulations with the governor's Show Me Recovery plan of kind of partially reopening with social distancing guidelines. Every county then could have stricter guidelines in place too. So, some areas in Missouri could be open for play, and in some were not open initially either. So, that's something to kind of take in consideration too from a facility perspective. So, we are going to move on to kind of the sports planner perspective, if you will. And I know Chuck was going to put up a couple of slides to go along with that, but I'll kind of start on the sports planner side. St. Charles recently kind of made national news for a youth baseball tournament that took place on Mother's Day weekend, and one of the first tournaments again to kind of take place in the coronavirus COVID-19 era. And again, it certainly made national news. Kind of to provide some quick, maybe historical context on it. Again, Governor Parson partially reopened the state on May 4th with some social distancing guidelines and other guidelines in place. The tournament director for Game Time Sports kind of utilized those parameters and implemented social distancing on and off the field for Mother's Day weekend, and utilized a ballpark facility in St. Charles County and a ballpark facility in Jefferson County. So just to the west of St. Louis and just to the south of St. Louis, remembering that, St. Louis was not open at that time, and he typically used facilities in St. Louis County as well. So again, with it being in St. Charles County and being close to the house, I went out there for just an hour on that Saturday of Mother's Day weekend and just took some pictures. Wanted to just get do some observing. And again, this tournament director with Game Time Sports kind of knew that the eyes of the youth sports world would be on him, and he wanted to put these policies and procedures in place and make sure they were followed through on. But it was kind of interesting to be out there. I just wanted to see what the atmosphere looked like, what social distancing on the field would look like, what social distancing off the field would look like, and just had a couple pictures from that experience. And the first picture you see, and real quickly, the tournament itself was about 50 teams. It was about 50 teams. Typically, I think last year's tournament, he said, was over 100 teams. Of those 50 teams, they were all from the metro area. So they were, a day trip team coming into St. Charles County. Real quickly, this is the concession stand from that Game Time Mother's Day tournament, where they've kind of got it roped off, and signage with social distancing. So everything looked to be fine with this particular setup. Chuck, if you would go to the next slide, please. This one's interesting, and again, one of the on the field social distancing guidelines, and things have changed so much, guys, and you know that what was happening right at the beginning of May has been fluid and adjustable and adaptable, and you're seeing different rules on the field now. But again, this was just initial observations for kind of that return to play. You see that the umpire was not behind home plate. He was about 6 feet behind the pitcher, and you'll see another angle of him here in a second, and he was calling balls and strikes from behind the pitcher's mound. So again, to distance, socially distance on the field there. Chuck, would you go to the next slide, please? Restrooms, another thing there, roped off, signage on the door, max 2 people per restroom. The tournament director also hired extra staff to kind of oversee everything and make sure that there wasn't big groups of people or there weren't long lines. So did a pretty good job with what he said he was going to do with the social distancing. So again, good signage and kind of roped off with the 6 feet guidelines as people were heading to the restroom area. Next slide, please. Okay, so this was interesting too, and we'll get to the social distancing off the field here in a second, but this was kind of another guideline with the hitting team. They could only have 3 people in the dugout at a time, which included the coach, and then the rest of the hitting team was instructed to line up 6 feet apart down the baseline fencing. And then, as they got closer, they could eventually move into the dugout, so on and so forth. But again, there's an example of, okay, for the most part, the players were doing a good job of social distancing and kind of waiting their turn. Again, they're kids, so it's not going to be perfect all the time, but they did a good job of following those rules as far as waiting to take their turn to come up to bat. Next slide, please. Okay, and then real quickly too, just kind of off the field social distancing. The ballpark where this tournament took place, there were not bleachers, so that made it a little bit easier. The fans, the spectators were spread out all throughout the park. Saw people sitting in the outfield, saw people sitting way up on a hill. So the spectators, fans, if you will, themselves did a good job of social distancing. And of course, I wanted to address the masks as well. I did see an umpire with a mask on. I saw a couple coaches with masks on, and saw several fans, spectators with masks on as well. But the majority of the people at the ballpark that day did not have masks on. Just to kind of add that in as a reference point. So it was interesting again when this all broke and again made national headlines, and kind of see what those social distancing guidelines look like on the field and off the field. Again, it's kind of that thing where, okay, somebody jumped in the water first, and since then we've been seeing other baseball and fast pitch softball organizations hosting tournaments as well. And again, I think it's a very fluid situation on kind of what social distancing looks like now on the field. Any follow-ups to, and then I'm going to kick it, Mark, I'll start with you too, kind of as a sports planner as well. Any follow-up on that? Zach or Lance, any follow-up from a sports planner perspective? I know we work with them all the time, kind of on what you're seeing and kind of in their mindset. And again, I'll start with Mark, because Mark, you are a sports planner as well in regards to being a facility operator. Any follow-up thoughts on the sports planner perspective?
Mark had to do something, so it's just
okay.
me on here.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Maggie.
I had to move to my office, so I'm trying to turn the video back on, but I can still talk.
Sure.
So, I mean, the only follow-up I would have is that, I mean, we're seeing more and more people. We were surprised to have as many people out here as we did this past weekend, but everybody's so tired of being cooped up, so more people are coming out. I mean, people are just wanting to read our guidelines. That's really all it comes down to. They're okay with following it, but they want to see it in print, and they want to see it on our website, and they want to actually know like what we're doing to combat this whole issue. So we keep resharing it. We made a PSA that we've got on our video board. It plays before every single game.
reminds everybody of all the guidelines, and we go in depth on our videos. So it's just the constant reminder that yes, we are doing it. We're not going to be the Gestapo and police everyone that sits down, but we've given the guidelines. These are how we're going to follow them. And if you want to play baseball, this is what you have to do. And that's kind of the mentality we're taking, is follow the guidelines and you can still play baseball. Don't follow the guidelines and we get shut down and then you're not playing baseball. And that's kind of how we've had to approach things. So other than that, I mean, you guys covered everything, especially in that survey. So.
Very good. Zach, Lance, anything to follow up on the sports planner's perspective on what you're talking about and hearing and seeing?
I think the only thing that I would add, which was kind of seemed countered to the point just made, but some of the things I've been hearing, I know is, planners are worried about, they might be able to get teams, but they were worried about, do parents go, do you just start seeing like mom or just start seeing dad or grandma, not seeing, as far as youth sports go, the whole family coming, maybe just one parent, which then in turn hurts, their bottom line as far as, them keep taking gate and really could affect, the money they're able to generate from an event.
Yeah, good point. Lance, anything to add? Got you on mute, Lance.
One thing we are, with the event coming up end of June, is we're going to institute a gate fee. If our facilities are going to open up, hopefully June 15, we're going to ease into it. We're not going to ask our facilities to staff a gate and take gate for a baseball tournament. So we're going to do the gate fee. That should eliminate a contact point, should make the facilities feel more comfortable running the event. We're not going to generate as much money. There's no doubt about that. But I think it's the right thing to do. And I think going back to the planner's perspective, questions I'm being asked are, so if I bring my event to your city, do I have to purchase hand sanitizers at every venue? What's the policies and procedures to still bring my event to your city? We don't have all those answers yet. So, I mean, it's just trying to be communicating as much as possible with those planners before they come to your city.
You bet. Well said.
Chris, if I can jump in, we do have a couple of questions for you and the group. So basically, I'll put these out there and whoever wants to deal with it. But basically, one of the questions is, what is the status of certain sports that are close contact, like basketball, soccer, volleyball, etc.? Seems they aren't coming together as soon as the bat and ball sports.
Interesting perspective in Springfield, Greene County is softball was designated a contact sport. So we're under those, we were under those guidelines as well. You look at guidelines of other states, baseball is not considered a contact sport. So there have been challenges with that. I can't speak to anything on volleyball or basketball just yet, other than for the summer months here. We're proceeding with baseball in that modified way. In many ways, Mark and Mackie have talked about, and Chris as well.
Zach might have an interesting perspective on what you just said too, Lance.
Yeah, and I think it kind of goes into your point, Chris, earlier, which I'll get to in a second. I can say baseball and softball right now in Columbia are considered non-contact. We're kind of in three phases here in Columbia, so it looks like contact sports, late summer, late July, potentially being allowed. But it goes back to your point earlier of indoor versus outdoor facilities, and I think that's a question right now that we still don't have an answer to. Soccer being considered a contact sport, I think late July we would be able to make that happen. But then when you start talking indoor facilities, we just don't know what that looks like right now.
Yeah, that's a great question, Wes, and I appreciate you asking it. And like we've talked about, I mean, there's an example right there on how you define non-contact sports and two county leaderships, if you will, health departments define what non-contact sports are differently, or label a sport. One labels it a contact sport, one labels it a non-contact sport. So, I mean, that's just a microcosm of, playing with kind of different sets of rules and trying to figure out everything.
Well, here's another thing too, Chris. A friend of mine who has a trainer with the Texas Rangers, when going on here in Springfield, with the fact that it was considered a contact sport, he asked, is baseball considered a contact sport? And And contact sport, according to this trainer with the Rangers, is sports such as basketball, hockey, lacrosse, or blood sports. So really it's the football, martial arts, rugby, et cetera, that's considered a contact sport, generally speaking. But that's not the case right now. Baseball is considered a contact sport in Springfield, Greene County.
Interesting. Yep. Okay.
We do have one other question.
Sure.
Basically, how many communities have completely canceled youth baseball and softball due to the inability to adhere to city insurance policies?
Any feedback on that? I don't have any direct information. It's a great question, but I don't have any direct information on that right now. But the insurance and the liability, I mean, that's a whole nother topic that we could probably spend an easy hour on talking about the liability from a sports planner perspective. But I don't have any examples of that currently.
Okay. I do want to note that a couple of the people that are participating on the webinar have shared some sports guidelines for their particular communities. Everyone, basically, when we post this to our website, if you'll simply go to MissouriTravel.com, if you take a look at education, drop down to workshops, we'll make sure that when we post the link that basically is going to allow you to view this video, right underneath we'll provide links to these shared sports guidelines as well, so that if you want to see what some other communities are doing, you'll be able to do so.
That's great. And Chuck, can we move to the survey slide? And we're going to move to the kind of the parent coach perspective. And I know we've touched upon this a little bit already, but getting the feedback of the parents and when they feel comfortable allowing their kids to travel for sports is huge as well. And recently the Huddle Up group, John Schmieder's organization, put together a survey where they surveyed about 2,600 parents and asked several of the questions that we're all thinking as well. And when are they going to feel comfortable allowing their kids to participate in sports, and then participate in travel sports, and then how far can they travel, and so on and so forth. And kind of like what Mackie talked about, you know, what's important to them in order to travel in terms of the signage and the language, and just showing that a sports facility does have a plan in place are, I think, all crucial things from a parent's perspective. So, you know, as we talk about it, we'll leave this slide up here, and it's got some very interesting insight on what we can expect in terms of traveling teams from the parent's perspective. But with that said, Lance, I know you've got multiple perspectives on this as a club administrator. I would like to kick the question to you first and you are also a parent, and you all travel too. So I'd like to kick this to you first, just kind of a parent coach, club administrator perspective, some of the things that you are being asked, some of the things that you are thinking, some of the information you're sharing with the teams. Sure
enough. So putting on my club administrator hat, I am a vice president of our baseball club, the Springfield Mavericks in Springfield area. We're not a mammoth club, but we do have 95 to 100 families. We have, of those 95 families, families from 40 different cities or towns in the area. An interesting component of that is our club is incorporated out of Christian County, Ozark, Missouri. Our practice fields are in Greene County, and our indoor facility is in Greene County. As Mackie and Mark said, Christian County is open for business for sports. Where my home is located and where our practice field is located, that's just 1.5 miles, 2 miles from the Christian County border. So you can play baseball there, but not over here, for lack of a better word. That was a hard concept, especially when you had families from 40 different cities, not necessarily all from Springfield. We followed all the guidelines. If you could practice in Springfield, Greene County, we allowed that when that started. I will say prior to that, our teams wanted to practice, they wanted to play, so they would go to Christian County and practice. Things we did at our indoor facility to make people more comfortable with sports and the return to sports was we brought in a disinfecting company out of Tulsa, Oklahoma to sterilize the turf, the walls, the netting, the equipment, everything. That happened beginning of May before everything opened up. As that was going on, we also surveyed all our parents and wanted to make sure that they knew, no matter where they stood on this issue, that they were not going to be penalized for what they believed. If they did not feel comfortable playing, they did not have to play. But we wanted to make sure that those that wanted to could. So in our survey of 100 people, 100 families, we only had 2 people that were not comfortable returning to play for practice in the middle of May. We are now at 100% of all families are comfortable playing and have been playing since basically that Mother's Day weekend you mentioned earlier, Chris, in St. Louis when they started events. There were events over in Miller, Missouri, which is the county to the left of Springfield, Greene County, and also Nevada, Missouri. So club perspective, everybody was ready to go. They are, and I will say that most of our teams have dialed it in. They're not traveling as far away, but there are still they do have to go outside of Springfield. They cannot play in Springfield. So you're seeing a lot of teams go to Miller, Missouri, the Sandlot, Nevada, and Branson, and then other areas. So Joplin has some restrictions. He's on the call and he can text me if I'm wrong, but they have a 50-mile radius for certain facilities that they cannot. So like our team could not go to Joplin per se and play at certain facilities.
Lance, thank you for that, but to piggyback off what you were saying and surveying the parents and getting their feedback and going back to the game time tournament that took place in St. Charles County Mother's Day weekend. And the tournament director said the parents were very split at that point on playing or not playing. And he basically said 50% of the parents were so excited they wanted him to run for president. And the other 50% wanted him just to run away, period, and not come back. So again, it goes to, being obviously empathetic and agile to what's going on and what all the different stakeholders and participants are saying and playing within those rules and guidelines. So that's certainly interesting perspective. Zach, did you want to add anything into the kind of parent coach perspective or coach perspective? I know you talk to coaches quite a bit.
Yeah, not really, not a parent, but we've talked about this, Chris, and I think, we really have 2 customer segments now, always the planner, but really parents now are a customer of ours because without them, the tournaments don't exist and without the kids. And I think this survey confirms what I'm about to say, but I think it's really important for us now to make sure when these families do come to your destination that they feel safe and they feel comfortable. Lance touched on it a little bit, but it really shouldn't be our job to change somebody's mind to make, to sell them to come here. We want them to feel, we want them to want to come here, but it's our job and our role to make them feel safe when they are here.
Yeah, it's a great point. And we'll move in kind of to the last perspective and look forward to talking about that. And that's the perspective of a CVB sports manager or a sports commission. And, what's that perspective look like? And I'm going to kick this to you, Zach, here in a second for some of your insight. But, some of the things that we've been looking at, again, is that perspective and our role. Kind of talked about it earlier, but to be a source of information, are there different initiatives right now to kind of engage the sports community, to engage the local market facility community, kind of be that voice to bring everybody together Are there opportunities now to do virtual events to stay relevant? Are there opportunities when the time is right to prospect? And we've talked about it, and the data shows it kind of within that drive market when the time is right. So, again, the perspective and the role of a CVB or sports commission at this time is certainly interesting, and would love to hear your all's perspective on that. And Zach, like I said, I'll kick it to you first, and we'll go from there.
Yeah, you touched on one thing that we're taking a look at, and we have a great communications team that we're working with to make this happen. But just trying to be creative and find different ways to be innovative to get our product to the planner, and that's one thing we're looking at is virtual site visits. So what that looks like, I don't know yet. Like I said, we're in the works and kind of brainstorming, but we've thrown around some ideas that I think could be really, really good and really work. With that being said, I think there's also opportunity with everything that's going on. Obviously, there's a lot of unfortunate things we've all experienced over the last couple of months, but there definitely are some opportunities. And we've had 2 site visits over the last 2 weeks, in-person site visits. And I think, a lot of these people that would be hosting events right now that aren't hosting events has some time on their hands. The feedback we've got, people want to get out. They want to see facilities right now, knowing they're not hosting things. So we've been fortunate enough, to have 2 site visits over the last couple of weeks. And I just say that to encourage you. Don't be scared to reach out to these planners and see what's going on in their world. And if, they do have extra time on their hands right now, and our feedback from that perspective has been positive this far.
Very good. And I just want to piggyback on something you said real quick too, Zach, and, being a source and looking at innovative ways, but also being a source to like what's currently happening with the hotels and what's that look like, and what's currently happening with the restaurants and attractions too. Because if teams are traveling in, they're going to want to, a piece of the pie is the facility, obviously, and a large piece of the pie, but they're going to want to know what's going on from a hotel perspective and a restaurant attraction perspective too. Lance, I'll kick it to you for any of your insight and perspective too.
I would just say, and I'm sure I'm not sharing any new news here, but sticking with your groups through the thick and thin here, I think they appreciate that more than anything, and constant communication. They're going through territory they're not used to as well. And typically their boots aren't on the ground in your community. So you've got to be that person to relay that information as best you can. And certainly what's true in one destination is not going to be true in another. That can be real confusing for a planner.
Yeah, that is very true. And Mackie, I did want to go back to a question real quick, because I know that you're dealing with coaches and parents all the time, and you talked about it earlier from the facility perspective, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity, if you had any further insight that you're hearing from a parent or a coach's perspective there at the ballpark.
Yeah, I mean, it's varied. Obviously, our college players, they come here alone, so they don't really have coaches' input. But our leagues or our tournaments this past weekend, I mean, we had coaches that they wanted the info, like right now. They wanted to be out there. They wanted to see everything. We have the fortunate ability to live stream all of our events. So if people aren't comfortable coming to our facility, everything is live streamed. So they don't have to be out here if they don't want to. And then, like I said, it all goes back to communication. We're communicating every single thing we do. If something changes, the minute I know about it, it's on our website. It's in our remind text system that we send out. And it's just constantly being, I guess, reminding them that we're still going through it with them. It's not like we're trying to make their lives more difficult by temperature checking and by following all these guidelines, but it's that, we're doing it too. And just, I mean, for our Monday night minis, we had parents, we gave them the opportunity to decide if they wanted to play this summer, if they wanted to divert their registrations to a different season. And we gave them that option. And we had over 100 kids that were registered for the summer minis. And I think there's only about 15 that moved to the fall. The rest of them were like, our kids need to have a normal summer, and whatever guidelines you're going to put in place, we're going to trust you enough to proceed with that. And it's, I mean, just the normalcy that we're trying to have along with these guidelines. Parents want their kids to play, and they want to get them out of the house. So as long as we're communicating that, I mean, like Mark said, we have not had any negative feedback so far, knock on wood, but everyone has just been really happy to be here. So, and if they're not here, they've been really happy that we have a live stream. So that's where we're at right now, is just making sure that we're still communicating and still doing the live stream and making sure that baseball is still possible for everyone that wants to be involved.
Mackie just touched on one thing I think that's going to change the way facilities are rewired or built in the future, and that's the technological component of live streaming almost being a given in new facilities.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good thing. I do. So it's a way for the facilities to probably monetize even further, because the people that are going to probably turn into live stream, probably most were not going to be able to drive in anyway. So, and I know you guys do that as a free service, but.
Yeah, so we do it as a free service, but right now this is the age of social media more than it was 3 months ago. I mean, everyone is getting all of their entertainment and info from our social media, from everything we're doing. I actually just watched a video about the Savannah Bananas. They're in Georgia. They're a college league out there. They're going strictly to just live video for all of their league games, and they're coming up with innovative ways to do it, and we're trying to adapt to those innovative ways as well. We're going to put cameras on the dugouts. That way you can see the dugout view, or you can see the full field view. We've talked about potentially putting a mic on the coaches. I mean, we're adapting to that, but just the game is changing, and just making sure that everyone who participates knows that we're going to change with it, and we're going to do everything we can to adapt to the environment that we're currently in. So.
Very good. And you're 100% right. The game is changing, and some of those policies, rules, social distancing, what have you, could potentially change again come June 1st. So we'll all be monitoring that and following that closely and see what that means for sports and sports travel. So, Chuck, before I throw it back to you, I just want to double check to make sure, see if anybody has any further questions, and then thank you guys again for the opportunity, and enjoyed talking to you today about sports and sports travel. And if anybody has any further questions, I know myself or any of the panelists, I would think would be more than happy to share experiences and remain in communication on what we're seeing and kind of our destination compared to others. So again, we appreciate your time. And with that said, if I don't think there are any further questions on the chat box, and I will kick it back to you, Chuck.